Hey, all right. Hey, boys and girls. Sorry I am not here today. I wasn't here Monday either. I have COVID. Somehow I managed to avoid getting COVID-19 up until now. Go figure, it's like the first full week of school. um, but I'm doing okay. I'm not dying or anything. I'm with Tylenol and ibuprofen. I'm keeping my fever under 100. I'm pretty sick still, but it's not. You could probably hear them got congestion stuff, but we're gonna get through this. Doctor's orders say I have to stay out for isolation for 5 days, so I'll be back on the 29th if all things go well, which they should. So I'm going to give you a rundown of how we're going to try to play this out. Um, so today and tomorrow, I'm going to record these videos here and have you guys follow along. Make sure you're following along in your pair deck. Make sure you're answering the questions, and I'll point them out when we get here. They're on student pace, so you can go through the entire presentation as you want, but just make sure you get them done because those are going to be due at test date. Obviously, no test this week because I'm not there. And we'll always do a day of review before the test, so you've got, don't freak out about that stuff. This is on me, I guess, in a weird way, so I'm not going to make it punishing for you guys. Um, Sorry, my brain's fuzzy. So yeah, we're gonna record some videos today, Tuesday. I'm recording some of it today, Tuesday. We're gonna get through um, a lot of the government stuff. So main thing that we're kind of talking about in Unit One is Western Civ, like we talked about, like what is like why the Western world. But I also try to like sneak in the other standards about government types, which we're gonna mostly cover today. So we'll get through all that. Then tomorrow we'll finish up Rome. We'll do, sorry, we'll do Pax Romana and the collapse of Rome. So that's Wednesday. We'll do all that. We'll talk about the collapse of Rome and then how the European world starts to pull itself out of the Dark Ages. Thursday and Friday, I'm going to have your subs show you guys, so you can watch these on your own. But Thursday and Friday, I'm going to have you guys as a group watch a documentary called The Dark Ages. It's a pretty good document. The History Channel used to actually make good history shows, and this one was one of the better ones, I think, about the Dark Ages. Were they even really the Dark Ages? That sort of stuff. So that's our goal for the week. So today, go through this stuff, get through the governments. I'm also going to make sure you have a little time at the end to finish up that Greek philosopher chart. A lot of you emailed me and said that you did it as homework or whatever. You didn't need to do it as homework. Remember, you were probably listening. But I told you I would give you like 10 minutes to work on it in class. So today I want you to finish that up. So today, go through this stuff, government types, finish up your Greek philosophers. Tomorrow, Rome, we'll get through most of the Roman stuff and we'll get to like the Dark Ages and how Europe starts to pull itself out. And then Thursday and Friday, you watch that documentary, and we should be in a pretty good place. Next week, we can hopefully pick back up, and we'll be almost done with Unit 1. All right, so bear with me here, and let's get through this. Okay, so things we talked about before. We talked about ancient Greece, Alexander the Great spreading things. These are the most important things probably from this section because this is going to come again when we talk about the Renaissance later on. And really, when we're talking about the Western world and being founded on the Greeks, this is why we're talking about Socrates and the Socratic philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, that sort of stuff, and everything. What did they really teach us? Even though they were wrong about a lot of stuff, they taught us to question and challenge everything. It's okay to be wrong, right? It's okay to be mistaken about things. You just have to constantly question and challenge. Are we doing this the best way? Is there a better way of doing these things? So on and so forth. So question and challenge everything. That's the whole thing with science. Like science can be wrong, and it should be wrong a lot of times. Um, it's just you constantly keep learning. So, anyways, talked about all that stuff. Moving on. If they were wrong about it, but I already told you the answer. All right, cool. Greek city states. Darn, I wish I had my chalkboards or whatever right now. This would help. All right. So, ancient Greece. Um, you've probably heard of city states like Athens and Sparta and Delphi and Corinth, Thebes. There's a bunch of these things, and they were city states. Now, this is uh, hard to explain, but you've been lied to your entire life. In the United States of America, you think that a state is Ohio or Michigan or whatever. That's not true. If you look up like the definition of a state, It's a country basically. So like the United States of America is a country. Canada is a state. Canada is a state. Germany is a state. Um, More accurately, Ohio, Michigan, Kentucky, whatever, they would be basically provinces, right? They are parts of the bigger whole. So state just means country, right? Sometimes you'll hear people talk about nation states, they're talking about countries. Um, why is it in America that we've lied to our children for so long? Because we are the United States of America. If you remember American history, we originally were, colonies. We didn't become one country overnight. Um, the colonies had to get together to vote, create the Constitution and stuff like that, and they came together first with Confederation. That didn't work out. Then the Constitution, which was stronger, and we became the United States of America. United States of America. So like the United Countries of America. Think like the European Union today. Like that's sort of the idea. Um, so, anyways, when I say the word city state, long story short, when I say city state, what I'm saying is a country that's the size of a city. That's all it is. So when we're talking about Greek city states, polises, poli, we're talking about Sparta, Athens, all this stuff. They are like independent countries. So there's no like Greece as like one unified empire. All right. They were all like individual kingdoms in a way, sort of these city states. So huge variations between all of them. I'm only going to give you two examples because we're just going through this stuff here real quick. Some of the most famous ones too. So Sparta, you probably heard of before. There was that really famous, terrible movie called 300. It's not a good movie. It's kind of racist. Don't watch it if you haven't seen it. But it did make that "This is Sparta" meme, which you've probably seen 1,000 times. Guy kicks another guy into a hole. Um, that one is probably one of the most famous ones because they were the greatest warriors in the ancient world, and they probably were, um, because they spent their entire lives from childhood until their usual death probably, fighting and living in the barracks and learning tactics and all that stuff and being military soldier guys. Um, if you ever watch the movie 300, don't. It's not for children. But if you ever watch the movie 300, there's a scene where the Spartans are all very proud that they're all professional soldiers, and all the other Greeks that they're meeting with who are on their side are bakers, but bakers or bricklayers or other things, farmers, but then they also have to fight to protect their homelands. Spartans are, famous for being these tough warrior dudes. Why is it they could be tough warrior dudes, and why is it that other Greeks weren't tough warrior dudes all the time and had to be bakers, bricklayers, farmers? Because the Spartans were some of the biggest slave owners in the ancient world. And they kind of gloss over that in the movie 300, which is a big reason why I don't like it. But in Sparta, they had 12 to 15 slaves they called helots for every free Spartan man. And part of your manhood ritual was you had to go and kill one of these slaves. Like that was, they were brutal and harsh people, just not great. All of the slaves were kind of collectively owned by the Spartans. So a pretty harsh place. So massive slave owners. The slaves did all the work. They did all the farming, the baking, the bricklaying, all of that stuff. And so the Spartans got to be professional soldier dudes. Isn't that fun? Um, Spartans were not really big into art and philosophy and culture, and as a result, we don't really, all the Greek philosophers we talked about, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, they're all Athenian. They're all from Athens. Sparta's not going to leave us that long legacy. However, if somebody does say something is Spartan, what they usually mean is they mean it's very bare bones. It's just what's necessary. If your bedroom is Spartan, like if I walked into your bedroom and it's just a bed, that's it. Like hard bed, nothing on the walls, no carpet, that's it. Maybe a simple desk. That would be very Spartan. Most of your rooms are probably pigsties, right? But anyway, Spartan means like bare minimum, and that's kind of how the Spartans lived. They didn't value art and a lot of that stuff so much as other cultures. So little art or culture. The thing that we really want to take away from Sparta, other than the fact that they were kind of jerks and military dudes and stuff like that, is that they had an oligarchy. Now, an oligarchy means a rule by a powerful few. So there's uh, what that basically means is you have a small group of people who have 100% total control over everything that goes on. In this case, the city-state of Sparta. Sparta had two kings, and then they had a group of elders essentially who made all of the decisions, and they were all of the government. And that was it. You couldn't really question them or challenge them. Think about the United States of America. We vote and we have representatives and all that stuff. That's 100% different than what Sparta has. Sparta had kings, one king for war, one king for basically maintaining the city, And then you had a small group of elders who made all of the decisions, and that's it. Oligarchies are still around today. That's actually one of the most common forms of government in the world. China is basically an oligarchy. Um, Russia is basically an oligarchy. I mean, they're kind of like dictatorships in a way, in that there's one person up front. And we'll talk more about dictatorships here in a minute. But oligarchy means a rule by powerful few. So, like, there's always going to be a group of people who help people run the country. A king has his court and stuff. So, we'll sometimes make distinctions between monarchies and dictatorships and oligarchies, but in reality, oligarchy is kind of a catch all term. Now, in the United States of America, we're not really an oligarchy so much. I mean, like, we have a different president every 4 to 8 years. Um, they cycle through. Our Congress can be kind of oligarchical, where like you have a handful of people who've been there for decades, but even then they can cycle through a little bit more. Well, in America, we try to move away from that, but oligarchy still very common around the world, and that's how Sparta was led. So rule by powerful few. Athens, you're probably more familiar with. This is the Acropolis in Athens here. This started the war between them and Sparta because the Athenians stole money and used that money to build all these pretty things that you can go see as a tourist today. We're not going to talk about that right now. But Athens is most famous for their concept of democracy. So where Sparta is massive slave owners and all that stuff, the Athenians still owned slaves, but they were more naval based and they were traders and merchants and that sort of stuff. And they also valued philosophy and arts and culture, that sort of stuff. So we have more for Athens. When you go as a tourist to Greece, you go to Athens, you don't go to Sparta. That's kind of how it shakes out. The Athenian government that you're probably familiar with, rule by the people, democracy, you've probably heard of that before. Democratia. Demo means the people, like demographics, when you're talking about like different groups of people, demography. I can't think of any other examples, but krasia, krasi. Kratia is Greek for rule. So demo people, kratia rule, the people rule. That's what democracy literally translates to. Rule by the people. And that's probably the most famous one. So when I would usually be in class teaching this, I would ask you guys like, hey, who's ever heard or were taught that the United States of America is a democracy? Um, and you all raise your hands, and everybody's like, "Yay, democracy! We all vote." And it sounds great. Democracy is terrible. It's maybe better than oligarchy, I guess, like that some people have say, but democracies can oftentimes be crazy. Once you take government, American government, you learn that a lot of our founding fathers spoke out against democracies a lot, especially the Federalist Papers. And you'll also see that the word democracy does not show up in any of our founding documents. It's not in the Constitution, it's not in the Declaration, it's not in any of the 50 state constitutions. The word democracy is not there. And why is that? Why do we like some elements of democracy? We like the idea of people having influence. We like the idea of people having a say, and it feels good, right? Like when you're a person, you get to have your own say, your own vote, and it feels good. Um, think about what that actually means. So, rule by the people. That means if you can get 51% of people to agree to something, that's the law. Usually, I would pick on one of you in class. So just look around at somebody and pick on them. Um, please don't. But usually, I would pick on somebody in class and say, "Well, this person can't speak anymore, right? Let's all take a class vote. This person loses their right to speech." And because you're kids, everybody raises their hand and like, "Yeah, take away that kid's rights." That's as easy as it is. In a democracy, the rules, the laws, they change by the whims of the masses. And if I can convince enough people to agree with whatever, what do you want, cat? If I can get enough people to agree with me, then I can take away anything. I can take away your right to speech. I can take away your rights to religion, right? If I can get 51% of people to agree that this should be the way it is, then that's it. That's a simple majority. The people rule. That's dangerous, right? That can be very dangerous. I could take away your property. I could take away your house as long as I get, sometimes I say this, like, hey, let's pick a kid in the class. This kid gives everybody $5. Who votes? Let's all vote. Let's say Billy Susie over here has to give us all $5 each. And everybody's going to vote for that. It sounds great. Unless you're Billy Susie. What about their rights? And so democracy has some problems with it. Um, Democracy, and like our founding fathers wrote about it, oftentimes led to violence and chaos and demagogues, people who appealed to the people and got the votes, but then were basically tyrants. Um, anyways, democracy is very famous, comes from Athens, maybe a step up from oligarchy, where you have no say at all as an individual. It's still not perfect. And also, Athenian democracy was not really for all people, right? You had to be an Athenian man, so you had to be born in Athens. You could not move to Athens and be considered Athenian. So you had to be born in Athens, be male, and also obviously not be a slave, and then be a property owner. So you had to own land as well too. That's pretty restrictive democracy right away. No women. That's 50% of people. And then you're restricting people by birth, restricting people by wealth levels and stuff. So democracy is not perfect. All right. So question time. Like I said, go through the Pear Deck. They should be on student pace, so you can answer these up on your own and keep track of them. Remember, these will be due at test date, so do your best. I'm going to go through it kind of quick here because it's not going to be fun for you just to sit and stare at me. Uh, but pause the video if you need to. How is democracy different from an oligarchy? So democratia, how is it different than oligarchy? All right. Last government types today, because then we're going to get into that stuff, which we'll do on Wednesday. All right, so the last government types for today, and then you guys can finish up your Greek philosophers chart, remember. So Rome. So Greece declined in power. Greece, never really had a big solid empire. The Athenians tried, the Spartans fought them in the Peloponnesian War. Alexander spread culture, died, so it didn't work out long. But as Greece declined in power, a new power rose up in the boot. So over here, if you look at Italy, it looks like a boot kicking a rock. That's Sicily. So the Romans rise up, and the Romans are going to take all the Greek ideas and Greek philosophers and Greek art and culture, a lot of the religious ideas, and just run with it and go gangbusters. And they are going to have a huge empire. If you notice here, it says Mare Internum or whatever, the internal sea. That's what it is in Latin. But this is the Mediterranean. And so Mediterranean means literally middle of the earth. So this is the center of the Roman Empire. You can tell they are a naval empire, right? They didn't really go like into Russia or any of that stuff. They did get this land up here. Julius Caesar conquers that. They get up into England. But for the most part, they are a naval-based empire based around the Mediterranean, Greek-inspired. Cool beans. We don't need to go into all the details about it, but just give you some rundown here. So Greece starts to decline in power. New power rises up, and that's Rome. Rome started out as a monarchy. I want to say there were like 7 kings of Rome. I don't remember. But it was a city-state at one point. It was just one city. Rome was a city. Excuse me, right about there. In the Latium region. They spoke Latin, that's why. But anyways, they started out as a city-state, and they had a monarchy. And you've probably heard of monarchy before. If you haven't, you've probably heard of like mono, right? Like not the disease. Like the monorail at Disney, it only has one track as it goes around, that sort of thing. Excuse me, a monocle is like that funny little glasses thing that people wear. There's only one glass instead of regular glasses, but mono means one. And so monarchy means the rule of one. All right, that's it. It's different than dictatorship, which also usually means rule of one, and we'll talk about why that is. So monarchy, rule of one, monarchy, rule by one. It's passed on from father to child. So how do you get to be the next king? Your dad has to die. And I say dad, it's almost always male around world history. So monarchies, father dies, passes on to his son, the son becomes the king, and then when he dies, his son becomes the king, and so on and so forth. We call that a dynasty. That's not on here. I'm just telling you, that's a dynasty. So if you ever hear like the Carolingian dynasty or whatever, they're just talking about a bunch of dudes who were related to each other, father or son, and they ruled the country. So anyways, monarchy, rule by one, pass on to child. Now, this is where, so they get the right to rule from their parents, but that's not where they're going to claim they get the right to rule. Monarchs claim to have the divine right of kings, and that's still a thing today. Queen Elizabeth the second, the old lady, the Queen of England, who drives around in a little car and waves at people like this. When she dies, you'll be alive to see it. When she dies, they're going to do a whole crowning ceremony, and you're going to see the Church of England is going to be heavily involved, and there's going to be like religious officials, because a monarch is a political person, right? They're the ruler of a country, but they're also a religious leader. They're also tied to the faith. The idea is that God or gods, depending on your culture, time period, whatever, have selected you and your bloodline to rule the country. And as long as you are in good favor with the gods, then the God is behind you, right? And all the people should listen to you, because to go against you is to go against God. It's a genius way of ruling people. It worked for thousands of years until the United States of America. Like, you may have heard of that country before. The United States of America is really one of the first countries to break away from the divine right of kings. So, hey, if you believe in the divine right of kings, like, knock yourself out. But, like, we fought a war against that 240 years ago. Anyways, but we were one of the first countries to ever break away from that idea. Um, we when you become president, like, the Pope doesn't come and put a crown on your head, right? Typically, when a king would die and the next king, the prince would become the next king, the religious official, Pope, Cardinal, Bishop, priest, somebody would come in and then they would put the crown on the next king's head. And they're saying that God has selected you, you are the next person in charge, right? And so that's a big thing with monarchies. They are religiously connected. That's one of the big things. So Rome was originally a monarchy when they were a little city state, but then they started to expand. They started to kill their neighbors, and started to conquer their neighbors and add them into their empire. And they gave people an option. When they conquered people, they said, look, you can just die, or you can become Rome. You can join in with us. You can join and become our soldiers and become part of our army. Your nobles and stuff can join with us as well too. And so other people, after getting killed by the Romans, the people who were left would oftentimes meld in, right, and become Roman. And so Rome is the city state, but it's also the empire. Like, this is all Rome. And that's, Rome is Rome in Rome. As crazy as it is. Like, this is the Roman Empire. And the idea was that everybody could become Roman. That's sort of the idea. But as they got bigger and bigger and bigger, this became harder and harder and harder for one monarch to control, right? And this is 2,000 years ago. Over 2,000 years ago is when they started expanding all this way. So it was definitely hard. They didn't have email, they didn't have phones and stuff back then. So they came up with a different way. They needed to have more than one person involved. And they needed to have some structure to organize this whole giant empire. How do they do that? Well, they created what's called the Republic. So republic comes from Latin. So democracy came from Greek, demokratia. Republic comes from Latin. It means res publica, the public thing, the law. All right. So in a republic, everybody is supposed to know what the laws are, and then they would know how to follow the laws, right? They would know what the rules are for all people, and they would be posted throughout every city and town. And the laws, nobody was supposed to be above the laws, right? So the laws were for all of the people. In the Roman Republic, let's see if I can get a good, let's see if we can get the 12 tables of Rome. So in the Roman Empire, they would have these 12 tables literally carved into stone, and they would be put throughout the entire empire. And then they would have rules basically for how people are supposed to run everything. Nobody's in charge of it. They would have a Senate who would help, here we go. They would have a Senate who would help run the entire country and basically structure things, just like we have the House of Representatives and the Senate today. That's where we steal the word from in our Congress. They had consuls, that's like our president, and these people still, they were supposed to be limited by law. They were supposed to be controlled by the law. And everybody would know, look at that, that's an origin story. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty good. But anyways, senators would come together and discuss things and stuff, but it was all supposed to be under the limitations of the law. And you're like, wow, Mr. Malcolm, that sounds crazy. That will never work. It's our government as well too. The United States of America is a republic. If you've ever seen the Pledge of Allegiance, you don't say "and to the democracy for which it stands." You say "and to the republic for which it stands," because we have some democratic elements. We can vote for some things. We send representatives to vote for us and speak for us. But at the end of the day, we're a republic, and I can prove it to you. Earlier on, I was like, hey, let's all take a vote and take away somebody's freedoms of speech. You can do that in a democracy, but I can't do that in a republic. Because in the United States of America, we're a republic. We have a written law code, right? We have a law code that we all have to follow. And that law code says that we have the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, right? We can have diverse religions and stuff. And so I can't do that. I can't take away your freedoms of expression. And that's literally a law that we all have to follow. That's a republic idea, not democracy, nothing. We don't vote on that. You can't vote on that. Like, we'd have to change the Constitution, which is hard to do. The Romans literally carved theirs in stone. Property. I can take away your property, but I have to basically take you to court, right? I can take away your life. We have the death penalty in Ohio. So life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, property, you can pursue these things. I can take them away from you, but you have to have a right by trial. And that right by trial is enshrined in the Constitution, in the Fifth and Sixth Amendments to the Constitution, right? So our written law code that we all follow. So Rome grows, and as they grow, they need they transition from a monarchy over to a republic where they have a senate who helps talk about issues. The senators are supposed to represent the entire empire, and basically, just like our government is supposed to represent the entire country, they try to make everything work out. Eventually, empire is becoming very big. Enter this guy named Julius Caesar. Sorry, I'm dying here. Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was born to a lesser noble house. Um, he was a soldier. Um, Joined the military. Loved the military. Was famous for being a very good soldier. Rose through the ranks. Kind of cutting his story short here because I'm dying. Um, he conquered into what's called Gaul. Here's his Gallia, and this map is kind of small, but this was Gaul. This is where the Gauls live, basically. Not French people. The French are descended from the Franks, who are going to come in later. But these are like proto French people. So this is modern day France. And Julius Caesar marches armies up here, and he goes to war against the Gauls, and he goes to war in Great Britain and all this stuff. And he was working with two other dudes. Crassus, the wealthiest man, one of the wealthiest men to ever live, who was basically bankrolling him, and Pompey. Pompey was a great speaker, a great orator who helped run the Senate. And these three guys were kind of like doing all this stuff and making themselves very rich and powerful. Well, Crassus dies. He was fighting out over here. He and his son died. And so Pompey decides that he can't trust Julius Caesar anymore. Long story short, tells Julius Caesar, hey, I think that you're a threat to Rome. You should come back to the capital city and answer for your crimes. Oh, and leave your loyal soldiers back here. In the United States of America today, the military, the army, the navy, whatever, they pay for their soldiers. They pay for their, Marines and all this. That's all paid for. Back then, generals like Julius Caesar would pay his men directly. And so his men were typically loyal to him, and they had fought and served with him for a long time. When Julius Caesar gets this letter, he doesn't go back. He doesn't leave his soldiers. He marches his armies back from Gaul, back, crosses the Rubicon River up here in northern Italy, and then he crosses into the capital city. Pompey runs away and eventually dies in Egypt. Look that up on your own if you want to have a silly story about that. But anyways, and then Julius Caesar conquers Egypt and meets Cleopatra, and that's all beyond our class. But anyways, Julius Caesar is welcomed into the capital of Rome as a hero, and he becomes a dictator. He doesn't take the title emperor, but he is the dictator of Rome, the Roman Empire. So he is basically an emperor. A dictator is the same thing as like a monarchy. It's one rule, right? But here's the difference. Julius Caesar didn't get his right to rule. He didn't get his right to rule from his dad, right? He didn't get his right to rule from his father. It wasn't passed down from father to son. Dictators are not monarchs for that reason. Dictators take power for themselves, usually through violent means. They can later, but they don't usually claim divine right. Monarchs claim to be connected to God, and that God has selected me to rule in my family line. Dictator said, I chose my right to rule, that I get to rule because I took it, right? Do something about it. Anyways, last story. I'll leave you here before we look at the last questions. I can't spell memento mori. This is a famous quote. Julius Caesar's welcomed into the capital city of Rome, and as was the tradition of the time, when a Roman general or eventually dictator and emperor would ride into the city, it was said that a slave or a servant would ride in with him and whisper in their ear, "Memento mori," as they were riding into the city. Remember, you will die. You are mortal. Right? All these people cheering for you and all that stuff. Remember, you will die. Hey, that's a fun note to end on when I'm sitting here sick with COVID. Anyways, it's just to keep you humble, essentially. But anyways, question time. What is a republic? And give one modern day example of a country that has a republic as their style of government. Oh my God, if you get this wrong, I get to throw you out of the country. But yeah, what is a republic? So if you don't remember it, pause the video, go back through the Pear Deck, read stuff, Google it. You're going to need to know all these government types throughout the year. All right, so definitely know republic. What is meant by the divine right of kings? All right, that's pretty straightforward. Break down the words divine right of kings. Think about what that means. Once again, pause the video, answer it up, do your best. Remember, these are due at test date. And finally, if monarchies and dictatorships are both ruled by one person, why aren't they just the same thing? Why don't we just call every monarch a dictator? Why don't we call every dictator a monarch? Why is Saddam Hussein a dictator, but Queen Elizabeth, well, he's dead. But why is Queen Elizabeth II a monarch? What's the difference? Why do we use these different terms? All right. Wow, you're friends with your amazing government type knowledge now. All right, that's where we're going to stop for today. Make sure you work on your Greek philosopher's chart. Tomorrow we'll talk about Pax Romana and the collapse of the Roman Empire, and then we'll get into the rest of the stuff. All right. Have a wonderful rest of the day. I apologize once again for being out. Hopefully this is just a short little blip. Stay healthy.